We usually think the most dangerous people in the world are the ones holding weapons, soldiers, commanders, terrorists. But most of the time, we are wrong. The most dangerous people are not physicists, nor the men who spend their days calculating neutron flux or coolant pressure. Sometimes the most threatening thing a person can carry in their hands is not a weapon, but a folder filled with secrets. Because a bomb can erase a city and wipe its name off the map. But information can erase a nation. It was a rainy winter morning in Paris. A nuclear engineer finished his coffee, smiled at a woman he had known for only 48 hours, and walked out of the hotel lobby. He thought he was boarding a train. He didn't. By sunset, according to official records, he no longer existed. No arrest, no charges, no paperwork. Only one quiet question circulated through European intelligence circles. How can one woman make a man disappear without anyone noticing? He had never seen himself as a political man. For Dr. Samir Haddad, the world consisted not of ideologies but equations. Born in Haifa in 1961, educated in Lyon, specialized in reactor systems engineering. His life had passed in controlled environments, laboratories, clean rooms, white lights. His world was made of cold stainless steel surfaces and lifeless procedure manuals. There was nothing cinematic about him, nothing dramatic. He lived like a quiet cog in a machine. Yet by the late 1990s, without even realizing it, he had become one of the region's most strategic chess pieces. Not because he built weapons, but because he knew exactly how those weapons were hidden. Haddad worked as a shadow subcontractor for European giants, supplying valves, sensors, and advanced monitoring systems to sensitive clients in the Middle East. In bureaucratic language, this equipment was called dual use. It could power a hospital generator or become the heart of an underground enrichment facility. Haddad walked directly on that thin line. It could even enrich uranium, which meant he had access to documents most people would never see. Fake destinations, misdeclared shipments, parts routed through Cyprus or Belgium that ended up somewhere else entirely. At first, he ignored it. Engineers usually do. They focus on the technical problem in front of them. But over time, the inconsistencies piled up. Serial numbers didn't match. Safety reports disappeared. Budgets resurfaced under strange names. And eventually, the silence broke. Questions began. And in systems built on silence, questions are dangerous. In 2001, the world changed. After September 11th, intelligence services tightened everything. Borders, phones, money flows. Nuclear matters were no longer just technical issues. They were diplomatic explosives. Any leak could turn into a catastrophe. During this exact climate, Haddad contacted a German investigative magazine. He didn't call himself a whistleblower. He simply said, "I'm concerned. Concerned about safety violations, concerned about hidden supply chains. But for intelligence agencies, intentions don't matter. Only consequences do." And from Tel Aviv, the consequences looked expensive. At Mossad headquarters on King Saul Boulevard, a thin file was opened. No red stamps. No alarms. Just a simple title, Technical Exposure Risk. Under it, one name, Samir Haddad, 40 years old, nuclear engineer. Constant travel between Paris, Vienna, and Strasbourg. Meeting journalists, carrying documents. For most governments, he was just a problem. For an intelligence service, he was a variable, and variables aren't punished, they are controlled. Because trials attract attention, disappearances create silence. They didn't rush. Mossad rarely rushes. First they watched, not phone content, only metadata, who he called, how long, from where, then expenses, travel patterns. Everything turned into charts. Haddad wasn't selling secrets. He wasn't cooperating with enemies. He was simply preparing to speak at a conference in Vienna in March 2003. He planned to show documents. That was the red line. Because documents turn suspicion into proof. Proof turns politics into scandal, and scandal turns allies into enemies. So a quiet decision was made. He would not be killed, too visible. He would not be arrested, too complicated. He would simply be removed, questioned somewhere else, persuaded, if necessary, pressured, then returned to an ordinary, harmless life, taken out of circulation, like a human pause button. For such an operation, they needed someone special, not a soldier, not a shooter, someone who could approach without fear, someone who could make a man feel safe across a table. Leah Ben-Ami didn't look like an intelligence operative. That was her greatest advantage. Medium height, brown hair, soft voice, a face you wouldn't notice twice in a crowd. Before the agency, she studied psychology at Tel Aviv University. Her specialty wasn't weapons or tactics. It was people. How trust is built, how it grows, how it's guided, and, most importantly, how trust becomes a weapon without the other person ever realizing it. Her records showed something unusual. Targets rarely resisted her, not because they feared her, because they liked her. And controlling someone through fear is hard, but convince someone to trust you, and they open the door themselves. In January 2003, she received a new identity, Swiss passport, name, Anna Keller, profession, energy consultant. She arrived in Paris weeks before Haddad. No sudden moves, no pressure, just being there. Same cafes, same streets, same hotels. These operations aren't built on excitement. They're built on boredom. If it feels thrilling, something is wrong. February 18th, 2003. Hotel Novotel Gare de Lyon, 7:21 a.m. Haddad entered the breakfast hall, a folder in one hand, a half-finished novel in the other. He sat at the same corner table he always chose, back against the wall, door in sight. Even engineers instinctively look for security. Leah walked in 2 minutes later. She didn't go directly to him. She never rushed contact. She simply sat at a nearby table, then accidentally dropped her newspaper. A small, ordinary mistake. Haddad bent down and picked it up. Their eyes met. A brief apology, a brief smile. That was all. People don't remember grand gestures. They remember small kindnesses. Nothing else happened that morning, and that was exactly why it worked. Operations like this are rarely decided by force. They are decided by time, by patience, by the quiet mathematics of human behavior. Because trust is not something you create in a moment. It is something you allow the other person to build themselves. After breakfast, Haddad returned to his room and placed the folder on the desk. He opened the curtains. Gray Paris light filled the space. Cars moved slowly through the rain. The city looked ordinary, almost boring. He liked cities like that. Places where nothing dramatic ever seemed to happen. Places where a man could disappear inside routine. He checked his emails, reviewed reactor schematics, corrected a few notes for the Vienna presentation. Everything felt mechanical, predictable, safe. But his mind kept drifting back to something small. A woman's voice, calm, measured, unhurried. It surprised him. He couldn't remember the last time a stranger had spoken to him without wanting something. Most conversations during his travels were transactional. Receptionists, taxi drivers, conference organizers, quick words, polite smiles, nothing more. But this felt different. She had listened, really listened. Not interrupting, not pretending, just listening. For a man who had spent years buried in machines and procedures, that simple act felt strangely personal. And loneliness has a way of magnifying small kindnesses, especially for people like Haddad, engineers who live between airports and hotel rooms, men who speak more to instruments than to humans. After a while, even basic warmth feels significant. Leah understood that better than any weapon manual ever could. Because her training wasn't about combat. It was about psychology, mirroring, attachment, behavioral cues. She didn't try to impress targets. She reflected them, matched their tempo, their vocabulary, their energy. When Haddad spoke carefully, she slowed down. When he hesitated, she waited. When he joked softly, she smiled softly. Human brains interpret similarity as safety. Safety lowers defenses, and lowered defenses open doors no lock can protect. By noon, she already knew things most people would miss. How he organized papers by size. How he reread sentences twice when anxious. How his eyes instinctively checked exits in every room. These weren't secrets, they were patterns, and patterns predict decisions. If you know someone's patterns, you don't need to push them. You simply guide them, like gravity guiding water downhill, slow, invisible, inevitable. By the time they met again at lunch, nothing felt arranged. No pressure, no strategy, just coincidence. That was the real success. Because if a target ever feels pursued, the operation has already failed. But Haddad didn't feel pursued. He felt comfortable. He felt understood. He even felt lucky. Lucky to have met someone kind in a foreign city. And that quiet illusion of luck was the most dangerous part of all. They saw each other again at lunch. This time they nodded politely. By evening they were sitting at the same table. It felt like coincidence, but it was planned. Leah didn't ask about his job at first. She asked about travel, about Paris, whether he liked the city. Then slowly, gently, the conversation drifted toward work. She acted uninterested in politics. She never judged, never took sides. She simply listened, truly listened. One of the rarest things a human can do. Most people listen only to speak. Leah listened to understand. And Haddad noticed, for people who work alone, being understood is addictive. If someone truly listens, you don't want to let them go. He didn't. Outside the hotel, another world existed. Ordinary parked cars, cameras inside, agents dressed as pedestrians, tourists sitting in cafes, all watching one man. Yet from a distance, everything looked normal. Everything looked boring. That is the art of intelligence, making the extraordinary look forgettable, creating a day no one will remember, because people only remember what stands out. For 2 days, Leah gathered what analysts truly needed. Not secrets, intent. Haddad talked about Vienna, about the conference, about revealing the truth. He spoke about the documents he carried. He wasn't bluffing. He believed in what he was doing. He was an idealist, and intelligence services consider idealists dangerous, because idealists don't step back. They go all the way, which makes them predictable, and predictable people are easy to plan for. The decision was made. Time was shrinking. The window was closing. The operation was activated. No witnesses, no noise, no force. He had to leave Paris willingly. That was the cleanest way. Morning of February 20th. Rain again, cold, gray skies. Leah smiled lightly over her coffee. "Wouldn't you like to clear your head before the conference?" she asked. "We could take a short trip to Strasbourg." It sounded normal, harmless, reasonable. Haddad agreed. Because when someone makes you feel safe, their suggestions don't feel dangerous. The human brain filters threats through emotions, and Leah was no longer a threat. She was comfort. They boarded the regional train at 7:12. Half the carriage was empty. Passengers with headphones. An old man reading a newspaper. A young mother with a stroller. 2 maintenance workers near the back door. Nobody noticed anyone. Nobody would remember anyone. That was perfect. At 7:49, Haddad stood up. "1 minute," he said. He walked to the restroom. Timing is everything. The sound of the rails swallowed any noise. The door closed, a narrow metal compartment, and after that, nothing was ever officially confirmed. Some former agents speak of a fast-acting sedative injection. Others mention simple physical force and speed. The truth is probably somewhere between the two. The only documented fact: at 7:55, the two maintenance workers stepped off the train with a large equipment bag. At 8:03, the train continued as if nothing had happened. No passenger reported anything strange. Nobody shouted. Nobody ran. Just an ordinary morning. At the next stop, Haddad was gone. He was already inside a service vehicle, heading toward the Swiss border. No sirens, no chase, just logistics, like moving furniture. And that's what unsettles people the most. Not violence, efficiency, professionalism, silence. By the afternoon, he arrived at a temporary facility near Lausanne, a windowless building. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary office complex. No signs, no markings. Inside, soundproof rooms, medical staff, clean tables, coffee machines. This is what modern intelligence looks like. Not dark basements like in movies. No screams, no chains, just fluorescent lights. Calm voices and the same questions, asked over and over again. Are there copies of the documents? Who else did you talk to? What exactly were you going to reveal in Vienna? Pressure doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes silence is stronger. Sleep deprivation, uncertainty, loss of time. The same questions repeated endlessly. Days blur together, and people talk. Because the human mind cannot endure isolation forever. It needs connection. Even with the person questioning you. It isn't weakness. It's human nature. Leah wasn't there anymore. Her job was contact, to build trust, to open the door. After that, operatives disappear. They never look back. Because if they do, they start to feel human. And being too human is dangerous in this profession. Weeks later, the Vienna conference began. The schedule didn't change. Speakers stepped on stage. But one name, quietly, vanished from the list. Samir Haddad. No presentation, no documents. Organizers made a short statement. Personal reasons? Journalists shrugged, moved on. The world doesn't stop for a missing engineer. Officially, nothing happened. Unofficially, a crisis ended before it began. Months later, rumors surfaced. Long interrogations, psychological pressure, confidentiality agreements. Maybe cooperation, maybe persuasion, maybe just exhaustion. No one knows for sure. Intelligence history is full of maybes. Only one thing was certain. Haddad never spoke publicly again. Never gave another conference. Never met journalists. He started working for a smaller company in Spain. Smaller projects, less travel, less visibility, less risk. Just as the file predicted, containment successful. Years passed. Inside Mossad, the operation wasn't even remembered. No medals, no ceremonies, no celebrations. Just one line in an archive. Because in intelligence, success means nothing happens. No explosion, no headlines, no scandal. Silence is the only metric. Leah moved on to other assignments, other names, other passports, other cities, other faces. But sometimes former colleagues remembered Paris. The hotel job, they called it. How a smiling woman, without firing a shot, without raising her voice, redirected the life of a nuclear engineer. And that's the unsettling part. Most of these operations live in a gray zone. Not illegal enough for court, not legal enough to defend. Some call it protection, some call it kidnapping. Maybe both are true. Years later, someone asked Leah a simple question. Do you ever think about the people you manipulated? She didn't give a dramatic answer. She just shrugged quietly. If we don't make the move, someone else will. That is the philosophy of intelligence. Not good versus evil, risk versus outcome, one man's conscience, or a nation's security. Which weighs more? There is no clean answer. Only trade-offs. And trade-offs are rarely heroic. They're bureaucratic, cold, files close, names disappear, lives change direction, and history flows forward, as if nothing ever happened. Intelligence victories usually look like this. Not explosions, but absences, a missing person, a sentence removed from a report, an event that never seems to have happened. So when people think of espionage and imagine gunshots, they should think again. Most operations begin with a cup of coffee. A small smile, a polite question, an ordinary train ride, and a man who never realizes the exact second his future changes. If stories like this make you pause, if you ever wonder what happens between the headlines, stay close, because loud events shape memory, but the quiet ones shape history.